Now, the first thing on the agenda is, if you read my blog, something very cool actually. I did an experiment. It was a pretty long-term experiment, but it was in regards to crystallography, which is the study of crystal structures and forms. So I attempted to crystallize salt that I mixed in with water, so, pure sea salt, so it was pure NaCl. It turned out quite interesting actually. Here, take a look. So this is in comparison to my hand, you can see here. Now, that is how thin the original stick was, and the salt completely crystallized up. The water level was actually just about there, which is quite interesting. It didn't crystallize around the parts that were actually submerged in water. It only crystallized around the parts that were just above the water, and as the water evaporated more and more, so as you see, the water level is now here in the cup, and it used to be here. It completely evaporated. This was over 2 months. It is a very long-term experiment. So it completely crystallized. There was no salt left, or very little salt left in the actual water. But salt, it is strange because the salt shouldn't evaporate with the water. So how would the salt have crystallized on the parts outside the water instead of the parts in the water? It's very strange. I don't actually have an answer to that. If anybody has an answer, could you please post it? That's actually quite interesting. I'd like to know. So in theory, you can technically do this with any ionic compound, so that's any salt compound. So potassium nitrate, you could do ammonium phosphate. You can basically you can do any salt compound, any ionic compound. It can be crystallized in the same way. But why it crystallizes like this, I do not know. So that was the first thing I was going to, but in also relation to this, the reason I was going to do this is because I had an idea for a cool type of art, and I know this isn't technically science, but you know what the hell, we all indulge sometimes. So I was thinking of if you could crystallize different forms and different salts around shapes and objects, you could make just something that would be a regular, dull, everyday shape into something crazy. So there's tons and tons and tons of different kinds of crystals out there, and they all have different there's different tones, colors, and some of them are even clear enough you could shine like LED lights through them. So just an idea, if anyone wants to try it, you could post pictures, or send pictures, or basically send anything you want regarding to science. But yeah, so this is just salt, that's why it has this kind of rough tone, and it wasn't really done professionally, so that's also why it's not, you don't get large you don't get large pieces of crystal here, you just get very small little kind of snowflakey parts. But if you looked very carefully, you can't see this, sorry, but the camera isn't good enough, you could see that the crystals are actually tiny squares. That's because that's how salt crystallizes. Now a different compound would crystallize in a different way, because each different compound has a different crystal structure. But a very cool looking crystal if anyone wants to try this, but be careful because it is probably, I'm not quite certain, but I'm pretty sure it's a little bit toxic, is if copper 2 sulfate, copper 2 sulfate pentahydrate specifically. It makes a very nice blue crystal. If it's crystallized very well, you can get very large crystals, and they're completely clear. It's actually quite cool. I mean, if anyone's a Breaking Bad fan. So yeah, that's what I had to show you this time. If anybody has any ideas for future videos, or any ideas for future anything regarding to science, basically on the site, just post, email, you know, Facebook. I'm all open. And so I will post another video next week. And thank you very much. Have a nice day and keep on sciencing. Sorry, one last thing. I will post a how-to on how to do this experiment with basically any salt compound should work, in theory. Don't hold me to it, but I'm almost certain. I'm like 90% certain. It does take a considerable amount of time. Now, to get this large of a crystal, I don't know, I wasn't monitoring it closely, but I left it somewhere that it wouldn't be disturbed for about a month and a half, a little more. but that's just because I forgot I was doing the experiment. Crystals should start to form in the way I explained. About a week in, you should see noticeable crystals. Try to use wood for when I explain in the how-to for the cross beam and the actual crystal holder. The actual, what's a word for that? Whatever. For the actual peg in the center, because it soaks up water. I think that might have something to do with it. Again, I don't really know. Post, please. That sounded desperate. C'est la vie. Yeah, I'm rambling now, so again, keep on sciencing.